Life's funny, you know? One minute you're just a regular girl, working 9 to 5, living a simple, uneventful life, and the next, you're caught up in a whirlwind romance that feels like it's straight out of a movie. That's exactly what happened to me. I was 25, working as an assistant at a bustling law firm downtown. It was all about paperwork, court dates, and endless coffee runs. Not exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. Then, at a friend's birthday bash, I met Alex. He was different, charming, with a rough edge that I found irresistible. He worked as a construction foreman for this big company that had him traveling all over the place. We hit it off instantly, finding solace in our shared love for cheap beer and disdain for fancy parties. Our conversations were real, filled with laughter and a dash of sarcasm. Before we knew it, a short, fiery romance blossomed between us. It was intense, passionate, and completely unexpected. We were like two puzzle pieces that somehow fit perfectly together. "Marry me, Alice," Alex said one night, out of the blue, his voice rough but sincere. We were sitting on my small apartment's balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance. I remember laughing, thinking he was joking. "You serious?" I asked, my heart racing. "As a heart attack," he replied, his gaze locked on mine. And just like that, we decided to tie the knot. No grand gestures, no fancy proposal, just us, making a spontaneous decision that felt right. Our wedding was a simple affair, just close friends and family. My parents had passed away years ago, so it felt bittersweet not having them there. But Alex's mom, Laura, she was like a rock, supportive and kind. She was all Alex had, and soon, she became family to me too. Life after marriage was different. I quit my job to focus on our family, welcoming our son David into the world not long after. Alex's job kept him on the road a lot, but we managed. Or at least, I thought we did. Laura was my go-to whenever things got tough. With Alex away and no parents of my own to lean on, she was my lifeline. "Hey, you're doing great, Alice," Laura would say, her voice always soothing. She had this way of making you feel like everything was going to be okay, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. It wasn't long before the cracks started to show. Alex's business trips got longer, and the money wasn't flowing as freely as it used to. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I remember confronting Alex about it one night, after putting David to bed. "What's going on, Alex? You're barely home, and we're struggling to make ends meet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ah, come on, don't start with that again. You know I'm doing this for us," he snapped, his tone harsher than I expected. "But it doesn't feel like us anymore. It's like you're living a whole other life," I pushed back, feeling my frustration rise. "You think this is easy for me? You think I enjoy being away? You have no idea how hard I'm working," he retorted, his face tense. The conversation went nowhere. We ended up going to bed angry, the silence between us heavy. I lay there, listening to his steady breathing, feeling a million miles away from the man I married. When David turned 5, Alex dropped a bombshell on me one evening as we were clearing up dinner. "You need to start working, babe. Can't just be me bringing in the dough anymore," he said, not even looking me in the eye. I remember freezing, a plate in hand. "Work? But what about David? Who'll pick him up from school, do the house stuff?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll figure it out. Lots of moms work and manage just fine," he shrugged, as if it was the most obvious solution in the world. So, I found myself a job as a manager at a small car repair shop. The pay wasn't great, but it was something. My days became a blur of work, school runs, and trying to keep our little home from turning into a disaster zone. Alex's contributions dwindled with time, and his business trips stretched so long, I sometimes forgot what it was like to have him around. One night, after putting David to bed and sitting down with the bills, worry gnawed at me like a hungry rat. I dialed Alex, who was supposedly on another one of his never-ending business trips. "Alex, we need to talk." The money's not stretching as far as it used to. What's going on? I asked as soon as he picked up, my voice tight with worry. Oh, not this again, Alex groaned from the other end, his voice laced with annoyance. I'm busting my ass out here, and this is the thanks I get? You nagging about money? I recoiled as if slapped. I'm just trying to understand, to figure out how we can make things better, I said, softer this time, hoping to steer the conversation into calmer waters. Well, maybe if you managed our finances better, we wouldn't be in this mess, he retorted, adding insult to injury. I felt a lump form in my throat, guilt and anger warring within me. Fine. Just try to come home soon, okay? I said finally, the fight draining out of me. Yeah, whatever, Alex muttered before hanging up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling more alone than ever. It was clear something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And with Alex growing more distant with each passing day, I felt like I was staring down a long, dark tunnel with no light at the end. It was just another one of those days, you know? The kind where you're running on autopilot, trying to keep all the balls in the air, work, kid, house. But David, bless his heart, had just brought home this report card that was nothing short of amazing. I was bursting, had to share it with Alex, thinking it would be a nice break from whatever chaos he was wrapped up in. So, I called him, my heart kind of doing that fluttery thing because, despite everything, part of me was still that girl who fell for the charming guy. The phone rings, and I'm picturing him picking up, maybe smiling when he hears the news. But nah, life had another curveball ready. A woman answers. Not just any woman, but the kind whose voice drips with a mix of annoyance and superiority. Yeah? Who's this? She barks into the phone. I'm standing there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. I'm his wife, I managed to spit out, my voice a mix of shock and anger. Who the hell are you? Oh, honey, she says, and I can almost hear the smirk. You must be the sad little wife. Listen up, he's in the shower. And you? You need to stop calling, stop asking for money. He's got a real family now. My world stopped. Just like that. It felt like I was falling, and there was no ground in sight. I hung up, my hands shaking, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Without thinking, I dialed Laura, Alex's mom. She's always been more than just a mother-in-law to me, she's been a friend, a confidant, a lifeline. Laura. I choked out, the moment she picked up. You won't believe what just happened. Laura's voice, usually so calm and soothing, went ice cold. Tell me everything, she said, and so I did. I told her about the woman, the words that felt like daggers, everything. There was a heavy silence, and then, I'm coming over, Alice. We're going to sort this out, Laura declared, her tone brooking no argument. When she arrived, her face was set in a way that told me she was ready for war. We sat at my kitchen table, cups of tea untouched in front of us, and hashed out a plan. Laura was furious, more so than I'd ever seen her. I'm calling him, she announced, pulling out her phone with a determination that was almost scary. The conversation was short and anything but sweet. Alex refused to talk, told his mom to mind her own business, to tell me to stop bothering him. But Laura, oh, she was magnificent. You listen to me, she said, her voice steel wrapped in velvet. You're about to lose everything. I'm disinheriting you. Everything goes to David. Hanging up, she looked at me, her eyes softening. We'll get through this, she said, reaching for my hand. We're stronger than his cowardice. I landed a job at a local bakery. Baking had always been my thing, a way to lose myself in something simple and sweet. The owner, Mr. Jacobs, was a gruff old man with a heart of gold buried somewhere deep under his crusty exterior. Listen, I don't have time for people who aren't serious. You gonna work hard, or are you gonna waste my time? He barked during the interview. I looked him straight in the eye, my resolve steeling. I'll be the hardest worker you've got. Just give me a chance. He must have seen something in me, some spark of determination, because he grunted, "All right, you start Monday. Don't make me regret it." Working at the bakery was a lifeline. It was hard, sure. Early mornings, long hours, but there was something about kneading dough and watching things rise from the oven that felt like healing. Like I was building something new from scratch, just like my life. Laura was a godsend. She stepped in to help with David, picking him up from school and helping with homework. Our evenings were spent at her place or mine, going over the day, sharing meals. We were a team, me, her, and David against the world. One evening, after putting David to bed, Laura and I sat down with a cup of tea. "You're doing good, Alice," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Some days are better than others," I admitted, staring into my cup. "But I'm trying. For David." "That's all you can do. Try. Keep moving forward. Alex, he made his choices. Now we make ours." David and I settled into this new rhythm, with Laura's help. The days were long, but there was this sense of purpose that kept me pushing forward. It was during one of those late nights, after a long shift at the bakery and David was sound asleep, that I made a decision. I was going to file for divorce. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, tethered to a man who had so clearly moved on. The next day, I called a lawyer, a friend of a friend who didn't charge me an arm and a leg. "I want to file for divorce," I told him, my voice steady. "And I want to sue for alimony for David. He shouldn't suffer because his father made selfish choices." Then, the call came. "Alex." His voice was like a thunderclap on the other end of the line, full of rage and disbelief. "You're suing me? For alimony? You've got some nerve, asking for money after everything." I held the phone away from my ear, his shouts echoing in the quiet room. It would have been easy to shrink back, to apologize and beg him to calm down. But I was done being the meek and mild wife he thought he could bully. "I'm not asking for me," I shot back, my own anger rising to match his. "This is for David. Remember him? Your son?" There was a snarl on the other end. "I won't give you a dime. And I'm not signing any damn divorce papers." I could feel my heart racing, but my voice was ice cold as I replied, "You'll talk to my lawyer. This isn't up for discussion." And with that, I hung up, ending the call and, in a way, closing the chapter on the man I once thought I'd spend my life with. The divorce was messy, dragged out by Alex's stubborn refusal to cooperate. But in the end, the court ruled in our favor. The judge granted the divorce and ordered Alex to pay alimony for David. It was a victory, bitter, but necessary. After the dust settled from the divorce and alimony battles, life found a new kind of normal. The bakery job was going well, and I was slowly putting away some savings, hoping to give David something resembling a stable future. But as David grew into his teenage years, I started noticing the gap between us widening. One evening, after a particularly long day, I tried to breach that growing chasm. David was at the kitchen table, buried in his homework, or so it seemed. "Hey, how's school going?" I asked, trying to sound casual, hoping for just a sliver of conversation. "It's fine," he mumbled, not looking up from his books. That was his standard answer these days, fine, a word that managed to say nothing at all. I sighed, leaning against the counter. "You know, I saw a flyer for the science fair. Thought maybe you'd be interested?" David shrugged, the universal language of teenage indifference. "Maybe." The conversation ended there, David retreating back into his shell, me left standing alone in the kitchen, feeling helpless. It was a feeling I'd become all too familiar with. Later, I confided in Laura over a cup of coffee. "I don't know what to do. He's slipping away from me, and I can't seem to bridge the gap." Laura sipped her coffee, her brow furrowed in thought. "Teenagers are tough, but he'll come around. You're doing everything you can." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I was losing my son, piece by piece, and I didn't know how to stop it. Our exchanges were brief, often strained. One evening, trying to bridge the widening gap, I ventured. "How's the college search going? Found anywhere you like?" David's response was curt, a quick "it's fine," without looking up from his device. That word again, fine, the most non-committal of reassurances. Hoping to engage him more, I mentioned, "You know, there are some great scholarships out there. We could look into them together?" He finally glanced up, his eyes cold. "I'll manage on my own. Don't need to bother with that. It's not like you can afford to help anyway." His words hit like a physical blow, reminding me painfully of Alex's departure and the financial struggles that followed. "I just want to help," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. David shrugged, dismissing the conversation and, it felt, dismissing me. "I've got it covered. I'm going to Norman, got everything planned out." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. He went to college, leaving not just our home but our city, diving into a new life where I seemed to have no place. Calls became rare, then stopped altogether. Holidays came and went without his presence. I sent messages, holiday greetings, and a bit of money when I could scrape it together, clinging to the hope that he still needed me in some small way. Years rolled by, and the void between David and me felt like it had cemented into something permanent. That was until one ordinary day turned extraordinary by gossip that felt like a slap across the face. My son, my David, was getting married. The news didn't come from him, though. I wrestled with the shock, disbelief coursing through me, before I picked up the phone. My heart hammered against my ribs as it rang, each tone a drumbeat to the impending confrontation. "David," I breathed, barely containing the whirlwind of emotions. "Is it true? You're getting married?" There was a pause, a silence that stretched too thin, before he replied, his voice a mixture of resignation and detachment. "Yeah, it's true. I didn't think you'd care to know." The words stung more than I'd anticipated. "How could you think that?" "David, you're my son. Of course, I care." Another pause, this one heavier, loaded with unsaid things. "I'd prefer it if you didn't come. I just don't want you there." The finality in his tone shattered any hope of reconciliation. The call ended with pleasantries that felt hollow, leaving me staring at the phone long after the line went dead. Laura, when I told her, was aghast. "That's not right. There's something more to this, I'm sure of it." Her conviction sparked a flicker of hope, or maybe it was stubbornness, within me. With a resolve that felt like defiance against David's wishes, I decided to go. Not to make a scene, but to show them all, that a mother's love isn't so easily dismissed. Laura, bless her, stood by me, a united front against whatever lay ahead. We found out the wedding details through a mix of sleuthing and sheer luck, courtesy of David's more talkative friends. An expensive gift was purchased, a silent testament to my love for him, regardless of the chasm between us. Laura and I, a duo driven by a mix of determination and apprehension, arrived at the restaurant. The venue was buzzing, a hive of activity and festive cheer that felt alien to me. We entered, unnoticed at first, the anonymity a small mercy as we took in the scene. There was David, looking every bit the groom, and his fiancée, radiant. And then, like a ghost from the past, there was Alex, with her, the woman who had helped him tear our world apart. David's reaction to seeing us was a storm of confusion and anger. "Mom? Grandma? What are you doing here?" His voice was a mix of incredulity and irritation, the sight of us an unwelcome surprise. I stepped forward, the weight of the gift in my hands grounding me. "I came to give you this, to wish you happiness," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're my son. I had to be here, even if you didn't want me to be." His gaze flickered to the gift, then back to me, a storm of emotions playing across his face. "I told you I didn't want you here," he said, each word a blade. Laura, ever the peacemaker, chimed in, her voice soft but firm. "David, we're not here to cause a scene. We just want to wish you well. That's all." The tension was palpable, a living thing that wrapped around us. Guests stared, whispers fluttering like leaves in the wind. The air was thick with tension as David confronted me with accusations that cut deep. "You cheapskate," he spat. "You couldn't even pay for my college or help with the wedding. I'm so ashamed of you, living in that tiny apartment like a loser." My heart sank as I listened to his cruel words. I had always tried my best for him, but it was never enough. Then it hit me, he knew about his father. He had found out that the man I had hidden from him for all these years was a co-owner of a construction company, living in a mansion. And he had chosen him over me. "Why?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Alex stepped forward, a smug look on his face. "I had a sudden change of heart," he lied. "Paternal instincts, you know." I knew he was lying, but what could I do? My son had betrayed me, and now his father was rubbing it in my face. Just then, my son opened the gift I had brought him. His eyes widened as he saw the expensive watch inside. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Your grandmother gave me some money," I said. "I started my own business, baking. It took off. I've opened several branches now." David looked out the window and saw my new car parked below. He rushed over to me, his face softening. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things." But it was too late. I had been hurt too deeply. "You're just like your father," I said. "You betrayed me." At that moment, Laura stepped forward. "I've decided to change my will," she said to David. "I'm leaving what I have to your mother. You and your father, you've made your choices." My son's face turned ashen. Alex lunged at his mother, screaming that he needed the money. What? That was supposed to be my backup plan. I invested in his education for this. I didn't need David, but his future inheritance. The scene descended into chaos, Alex's mistress joining in, her voice shrill with panic. "We need that money. Without it, he's facing jail time." But Laura just smiled and said, "You're on your own, son. You made your bed, now you have to lie in it." I looked around the room at the people who had wronged me. My ex-husband, my son, and his mistress. They were all broken and alone, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Laura and I left the venue, the heavy door closing behind us felt symbolic, like the end of a chapter. 6 months after the dust had settled, my phone rang, and on the other end was the last person I expected, or wanted, to hear from, Alex. "Hey, it's me," he started, his voice laced with a desperation I hadn't heard before. I need your help. I'm in deep, really deep. If I don't come up with some cash, they're gonna throw me behind bars." The audacity of his request left me speechless for a moment. After everything, he had the gall to ask for my help. "You've got some nerve," I finally managed to say. "After everything, you think you can just call me and ask for money?" I know, but you're the only one I can turn to," he pleaded. The sound of his begging was almost surreal, a stark contrast to the man who once held himself so high above me. I let out a bitter laugh. "You made your bed, Alex. It's time you lay in it." And with that, I hung up, a sense of finality washing over me. But the universe wasn't done testing me yet. Not long after Alex's call, David reached out, his voice soft and contrite. "Mom, I messed up. I see that now. I believed Dad's lies, and I turned my back on you. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? Maybe you could talk to Grandma about the will?" Hearing my son, my flesh and blood, begging for forgiveness and a second chance should have softened me, but the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "David, I'm glad you've come to see the truth, but it's not that simple. You hurt us, deeply. It's going to take more than an apology to mend things." "But, Mom, I hope you find your way, David. But for now, I need space. As for Grandma, that's a conversation you need to have with her yourself, when the time is right." And with that, I ended the call, the echo of his pleas lingering long after. Life, however, has a way of moving forward, even when we're stuck looking back. In the months that followed, I found love again in the most unexpected of places. He was the owner of a well-known restaurant chain, a man whose kindness and strength were a balm to my weary soul. We married, not with the fanfare of my first wedding, but with a quiet joy that spoke of deeper, truer things. Laura was there, as she always had been, her presence a reminder of the family we choose for ourselves. Our friendship, forged in the fires of shared pain and triumph, remained unbreakable. To new beginnings, she toasted at the wedding, her smile bright with genuine happiness. As for Alex and David, I wished them well in their own journeys, hoping they would find redemption and peace in their own ways. Life, after all, is a series of lessons, and I had learned mine well. Now, it was time to live.